it was important for me to join you today so that I could express my thanks and my gratitude to each and every one of you for the work that you do and for the incredible sacrifices that you make each and every day. You're on the front lines. You're dealing with the hardest cases. You're dealing with incredible passion and intensity on a daily basis. You're dealing with the lives of people and their families. The work is emotional. The work is grueling. The work is intense. And quite possibly, it's almost impossible for somebody from the outside to really understand what you have to face and what you have to contend each and every day, every week, every month, and every year as you go forth with your work. May God bless each and every one of you. May He continue to give you strength and guidance and purpose. May He always allow for you to have the strength, the mercy, the empathy, the understanding, but most importantly, that incredible sense of mission, which is what drives you each and every day. As you heard Sarah speak, it was last February that I had the opportunity to address the United Nations in Vienna, Austria. There were over 150 countries present and over 15 languages being spoken. After the conference, we adjourned to the antechamber of the Great Hall, where there was a team of reporters that had assembled to cover the event. And reporters were asking various questions like, how is this possible? How can a blind person perform in this capacity? How does it all work? And then one reporter said something so beautiful, but I believe helped to sum up everything that we stand for and everything that we're about. When one reporter said, just how American is that a blind person would serve on their state's highest court? Just how American is that? These are difficult times in our country. We're facing immense challenges and hardships. But it's moments like that and experiences like that that always allow for us to remember that American spirit, that idea that binds us, that sense that anything and everything is possible, that we live with no limitations, that we're an optimistic, energizing, enduring people, that we're a country of compassion, kindness, warmth, that we're a people that embrace, that we're a nation that believes that everyone has a purpose, everyone is created with a mission, and everyone needs to have the chance to succeed. I remember after getting elected to the Supreme Court, having a conversation with some other judges. We were talking about what are the qualities that go into being a great judge. And people said, well, of course, if you want to be a great judge, it's really all about what school you went to, your academic publications, your LSAT scores, your ability to research and to write and to publish. I remember joining in and saying, don't you think you're missing the most important attribute? When asked what that was, my response was life experience. It is our life experiences that create us. It is our life experiences that allow for us to understand and appreciate the stories that those who come before us have to share. It is our life experiences that allow for us to understand and empathize with the stories and the struggles and the challenges that people have to face and have to contend with every single day. It is the life experiences that you have amassed doing the work that you have been so dedicated to doing. Your life experiences are given to you for a reason. They're given to us for a purpose. We might not understand or begin to appreciate why we have the experiences that we do. But as we go forward as judges and as lawyers, if we're able to believe that we're part of something bigger, that we're part of something grander, that we're part of a plan that we can't begin to understand or even attempt to comprehend, then we come to realize that we're part of something bigger, grander, and more noble than anything we can possibly imagine or even attempt to comprehend. I remember as a young attorney, I got a call one morning. And for those young attorneys that are out there who are going into this profession, there are going to be certain moments that are going to define your practice. They're going to set you on a course or on a path that are going to help to guide you and give you that sense of purpose and that sense of reason that's going to give you the power to move forward. It was a wonderful young mother who was on the phone. She wanted to understand why. She reached out to me because she said, "Richard, I know that this is something you care about. I know you've dedicated yourself to helping people with disabilities and special needs. I know you focused on those who are infirmed. So I'm calling because I simply want to understand why. Why it is that I can be such a good person. I can be a kind person. I can be a pious and a righteous person. I follow all the rules. I do everything that's asked. And why is it that of all people in the world, God would choose me to have a child with severe special needs? Tell me, Richard, what kind of a life is my newborn going to have? Is he ever going to have any friends? Do you think my child's going to have a chance to go to school and get an education? Do you think that he's ever going to get married and have a family? Do you think my child will ever be able to live on his own? She went on to ask the question that so many of your clients ask. What's going to happen to my newborn when I am no longer here to take care of him? And when do you think we will ever have the chance to live an ordinary life again? And when do you think we will ever have the opportunity to no longer have to suffer? It's our life experiences that God gives us for a reason. When we talk to our clients and when we make decisions and we plan strategy, it always comes down to our experiences. It comes down to our understanding. It comes down to our compassion. It comes down to our empathy. It comes down to our purpose and to our reason. And I remember answering this beautiful new mom by saying, I don't believe that from this moment forward there will ever be anything about your life or your child's life or your family's life that will ever be ordinary again. Because I believe that you were sent here and your child was sent here to no longer simply be ordinary, but to be extraordinary. And I truly believe that God does not create anybody with the idea that they should be sent here to suffer. But there are some who walk among us that do have to struggle. And that's what you do each and every day with your clients. You embrace their struggle. It's our struggle that gives us strength. It's our struggle that gives us focus. It's our struggle that gives us identity. It is our struggle that lets us understand that mission and that purpose that we are ultimately sent here to do. You come to realize as you go through life, as your clients go through life, that an easy life does not always correspond to a good one. And often those who walk among us that have to know a greater struggle or a greater hardship or a greater challenge come to live life in a different way. They come to understand adversity. They come to understand pain. They come to know hardship. But they also come to realize that they are sent here for something more. That they are sent here for something greater. And if able to embrace that mission, if able to embrace that purpose, if able to understand that meaning and that reason for creation, yes, our lives are not easy, but they are filled with tremendous purpose and incredible satisfaction when the day and the week and the month is complete. We often ask ourselves in the practice that you're in, with the things that you see and the experiences that we have, the eternal biblical question, the question that takes us back to the book of Job, which is, why is it that bad things happen to otherwise such good people? Why is it that there are some who walk among us that have to know this greater struggle and this greater challenge and this greater hardship than others can possibly imagine or even attempt to comprehend or even attempt to try to understand? It's interesting. You heard in the introduction that Sarah gave that I've been blessed to have had the opportunity of completing 20 marathons and a full Ironman competition. Athletics represents a lot about life. For those of you who are young attorneys, athletics will represent your practice. It will express the experiences you're going to have, the people that you're going to meet, the ups and downs that you're going to face each and every single day. I want you to imagine, if you would, the feeling you would have to dive into a frigid body of water as you begin the Ironman competition. For those of you who are unfamiliar, the Ironman is a 2.4-mile swim, followed by a 112-mile bike, to be completed by a 26.2-mile run. The rules of the competition are quite simple. If you stop, if you rest, if you take a break, you run the risk of missing a cutoff. If a cutoff is missed, you will be immediately disqualified from the competition. If you finish at 12:05 instead of 12 o'clock, it is like you were never even there. 2 years of effort, work, and training will literally be for nothing. So I invite you to picture, if you would, the feeling you would have as you dive into a frigid body of water. The water temperature that morning of Lake Coeur d'Alene was 55 degrees. Imagine how you would feel to swim in total darkness. You have no idea where you started. You have no idea where you're going. But most terrifyingly, you have no idea where you are. Being the only disabled competitor, you repeatedly get kicked in the face by all the other swimmers. And being blind, you can't brace for the ensuing impact. You try to surface, but it's impossible because there's other swimmers immediately above you. And lastly, other competitors become entangled and ensnared in the rope that connects you to your guide. And as they become entangled, the rope starts to become constrictive. And as the rope becomes constrictive and entangled, it starts taking you below the surface. And as the rope takes you below the surface, the waves start crashing down upon you. You try to get oxygen, but it's impossible because the harder you struggle, the quicker you get dragged below. You see this with your clients. Whether they're young or old, whatever their infirmities are, you see this with your clients. And you come to realize through life experience that at certain moments and at certain time when you're scared, when the outcome is unknown, when things are unsettled and uncertain, you come to find that that's when miracles happen. The reason that you do this practice is because you see the spirit and the soul that resides in your clients. And you see something powerful and exciting and elevating. For you come to see that in many situations, the body may be mortal. The body may be infirmed. But if given the opportunity, if given the chance, the soul and the spirit can rise, can disconnect, can guide, can transform, and can reach no limits. If Given the opportunity, the soul and the spirit can always guide the body. So why is it that bad things happen to otherwise such good people? And why is it that we have to dedicate our lives to those who have to face hardships and difficulties and challenges that most of us can't understand or even begin to appreciate? It's a beautiful August morning in New York City. I've memorized the loop that serves as a circumference of Central Park, so I'm able to walk unescorted. I always need a guide to run, but I'm able to walk without assistance. And as I was walking in New York Central Park, a bicyclist was traveling at a speed of an excess of 35 miles an hour. And due to such a high rate of speed, the bicyclist was unable to maintain control. And in doing so, veered into the pedestrian lane where I was walking, where he struck me directly in the back. A 35-mile impact is catastrophic, to say the least. It required over 10 weeks of hospitalization at New York's Mount Sinai Hospital. And that is why I understand why your work matters, why your work is relevant, and why your work is impactful. Life can change at an instant. Life can change without warning. In one moment, I had completed 17 marathons and a full Ironman competition. In the next, I was unable to do simple things. You know this all too well because you experience it every day with your practices. It's those simple things that people long for, that people miss the most, which is why your work is so telling and so critical. It's those simple things that you crave and that you pray that you'll ever have the chance to have again. It's those simple things like having the chance to use the bathroom. It's those simple things like how it feels to take a warm shower. It's those simple things like having the opportunity to sleep through the night without having to writhe in an undescribable amount of pain. It's those simple things like being able to do things without having to be lifted and without having to be carried. The biggest challenges that you fight for is people's dignity. It's their self-respect. It's their independence is what they long for. As a Supreme Court justice, I always tell my clerks that we need to make things simple. The more simple, the easier it is to comprehend and understand. The more complicated, the more we strive to hide what is really going on. What you fight for is people's basic dignity. It is their basic self-respect. It is their ability to be independent. It is their ability to live life the way they were intended to have the opportunity and that they were created to live. It is the opportunity to do simple things. People used to come and visit me at the hospital, and I'd ask them, so tell me, where are you going to go after you leave here? What are you going to do next? And they would tell me in a very rudimentary, very mundane way. They would say, oh, I'm going to go and visit some friends. I think I'm going to catch a movie. I have some dry cleaning I got to pick up. They wouldn't realize how extraordinary that was. They wouldn't realize how much that would mean to someone like myself to have the chance to go out of my room, to go off my ward, to go to the lobby, to see people coming and going. They can't even begin to comprehend that feeling of what it feels like to simply go outside, to breathe fresh air, to have a crisp fall day that you can take it in, to take a ride in a taxi or go in a subway. I would dream what it was like to have the chance to go for dinner, to hear the silverware and smell the food and have someone take your order and engage in conversation about your day with your friends and compatriots. What this is about are those simple things that people long for. It's those simple things that people crave. It's those simple things that people crave and pray for. It's those simple things that ultimately give life its reason, that give life its purpose, and that give life its essence. And if there is one message that you can take back to your clients, it's this: celebrate every accomplishment. Celebrate every moment. There is nothing that is too small to celebrate. There is nothing that is too small to take pride, to take joy, to take revelation, to take excitement in. I used to celebrate the fact that I could actually sit up in bed. It's hard to say goodbye to your old life. It's hard to say goodbye to being a 17-time marathoner. It's hard to say goodbye to what it's like to have been an Ironman. But what we have to do with our clients is we have to get them to focus on the future. You have to grieve for the past. You have to respect the pain. You have to understand the challenge. You have to understand the hardship. And you have to realize that not everything's always going to turn out okay. The worst thing you can say to someone in a hospital or a nursing home is, oh, everything's going to be okay. Everything's going to be fine. Those are hollow statements. They mean nothing. When you say that to someone who's infirmed, who's thinking about their past life, it is infuriating to them. It shows a lack of understanding. It shows that you're not willing to try to appreciate what they're going through or what they're having to contend with. It means nothing. Life is about having to understand, not having to be excited or happy, but having to come to grips with your new reality. So often people will say, when people are going through catastrophic injury or catastrophic changes, people will say, oh, are you going to make a full recovery? Most people don't make a full recovery. The key to survival and the key to thriving is not always recovering, but adapting. Adapting to your new circumstance, adapting to your new situation, and adapting to your new life. It is that power to adapt, and it's that power to understand and appreciate life in its perspective. There's always going to be challenge and struggle and hardship. There's going to be bad days, bad weeks, bad months, bad years. But those who survive are those who are able to find just enough good, just enough, that it can help to balance out all the bad, all the pain, all the hardship, all the struggle, all the anguish. Just enough good that you can have some balance and some ultimate perspective. In my last remaining moments, I want to emphasize this idea of celebration. Celebrate the small things, celebrate the little things. In my situation, I would celebrate the fact that you could sit up in bed, celebrate the fact you could use a walker, and celebrate the fact that you could actually find your way to the end of the ward. I'm going to end with one last story. It was a short time ago when it was time for the New York City Marathon. This would be Marathon 18, but it would be the first after a catastrophic injury, and it would be the first trying to run through the streets of New York with a shattered hip and crushed pelvis. Now, running through the streets of New York in this condition was painful, to say the least. As we approached the 59th Street Bridge at mile 18 and began running up First Avenue towards the South Bronx, the pain was becoming so severe and so intense that I remember reaching up to the heavens and praying that I would have the strength to finish this race without losing consciousness and without passing out. It was at that moment and at that time that you come to find that miracles do happen and that your inner strength does exist. when life is the most challenging for your clients, when life is the most difficult for your clients, you will come to find, as I did as I was running this marathon, that that's when you have the opportunity to find a sense of peace. You find peace with your new body, peace with your new circumstance, but most importantly, peace with your new life. And ultimately, by doing that, you're able to find a sense of peace with our Creator. So why is it, as you're on the front lines, that you see and you ask that bad things happen to otherwise such good people? And why is it that there are some who have to know a greater struggle or greater hardship than others? I believe through my experiences, the answer goes something like this. At a certain point in life, you can't spend your time, your energy, and your effort focusing your thoughts and your time on trying to get over it. You come to a certain point where you realize you have no other choice but to simply just get on with it. Because those who know struggle, hardship, and pain are the ones who will do what is hard to achieve no less than what is truly great. I ask you to look at your practices like a great novel. You will have easy clients and you'll have difficult clients. But look at it as a great work of art. For any great novel, there will always be chapters of pain, suffering, and setback. But it's only through those chapters you will come to find hope, joy, and triumph. We're given our life experiences for a purpose and for a reason. If I hadn't been born blind, if I hadn't had the opportunity to go through a catastrophic accident, I wouldn't be as good a judge. I wouldn't be as empathetic or as understanding. I wouldn't be as compassionate. I wouldn't have a fuller knowledge and appreciation of those hardships and those challenges. My decisions wouldn't be as sound as they are but for the life experiences that I've been blessed to have. Let us celebrate why we are here. Let us celebrate our mission. Let us celebrate our purpose. Let us celebrate our focus. Let us celebrate why we are here and what we are sent to do. Let us celebrate the very idea that extraordinary things can, will, and must happen for each and every one of us. But most importantly, let us always celebrate the very notion that yes, there are some who walk among us whose bodies are infirmed, but it is their spirits that truly know no bounds.
Thank you. Thank you, Justice Bernstein. I think they are maybe somewhat as inspired as I am. We have about 15 minutes, so we're going to take a few questions if anyone has any. Justice Bernstein is happy to answer them. So if you raise your hand, I'll point at you. How's that? Does anyone have any questions?
How long did the marathon take? So that's a wonderful question. I'm going to repeat the question so everyone can. The question was, how long did the marathon? The great thing about being blind is I can hear everything, so I'll repeat. The question was, how long was the marathon? So you have to do that based on before the accident and after the accident. So before the accident, my marathon times were very quick. I was proud of my marathon times. After the accident, my marathon times are relatively slow. I always say the term running kind of in quotes because with my injuries, they're so intense and the pain is so massive that ultimately my goal is just to finish and just to be out there and to have that experience. So my marathons were pretty fast before. Now it's just a different kind of a marathon, which is just to be out there and complete the race and cross the finish line and do it, with that pride and dignity. And people ask, look, you've done 20 marathons, so why do you keep doing it? And the reason is, and I think that this is kind of something that your clients probably face as well, is that if I stopped doing marathons after this life-changing event, my concern was that I would stop doing other things and that I would start slowing down. And I just kind of decided that life's about momentum. And once you start losing momentum and you stop doing one thing, then you're usually going to stop doing other things. And so that's why, marathon season is the most painful season of the year. I'm already registered for the New York City Marathon. And I'm from Michigan, but I go to New York because I just think it's more symbolic. And so I'm registered for the New York City Marathon the first weekend of November. And it's just kind of a symbol. You just have to get through it. You have to kind of push past it. And again, my biggest concern is that if I didn't do that marathon, then the year would be left kind of in a way where it wasn't fulfilling. And that once I get through the marathon, I know I can mark the year, I've accomplished what I've set out to do, and I can then move on to other things. But the marathon is an integral part of that. And I run with a special group called Achilles, which is an amazing organization. And they're dedicated to helping severely disabled athletes. So you run with a team of guides, and they give you directional cues. Hard right, hard left, soft left. You follow their directional cues, and that's how they kind of help you navigate through the course. Other questions, please?
Yes.
I wanted to let you know that when you said, "How American is that?" I got goosebumps. And I have a question. At the time that the news reporter made that comment, did the other people in the room understand what that meant? Was that something that was universal to that crowd?
The question was a great question. The question was, at the United Nations, when the international reporter asked her, and I can't remember what country she was from, when she said, "How American is that for a blind person to kind of serve as a Supreme Court justice of a state?" The idea was, she was kind of referring to the idea that, Americans just have this wonderful, positive spirit, this like incredible energy and enthusiasm, this idea that Americans have this idea that anything and everything is possible and can be accomplished and can be achieved, and it's this dynamic spirit of a nation that is what the rest of the world has come to admire. And judges, of course, we can't be political, so we can't discuss anything of politics, but I think it was one of those circumstances where it was just kind of nice to see, and the other reporters you could see they kind of agreed, and the other people that were present kind of agreed, which was, it was still relevant, even with everything going on in this country, even the hardships and challenges that we're currently going through, even the difficulties that we're facing, even though our identity is being questioned, it was still nice to see that the rest of the world still, even though it was some time ago, a couple months ago, they still saw that ingenuity, and they still saw that enthusiasm, that energy, and that excitement. And it really is symbolic of America that, wow, person can't see, but he's going to serve on the highest court. In most countries, that's unthinkable. The idea of a blind person serving in this capacity is something which just isn't done. But yet, in the United States, if you want to do it and you're able to find a way to do it, no one's going to stop you. There's always going to be obstacles and challenges that are going to put in front of your way. But if this is something you want to do, then go for it. And that's our kind of spirit of our country. And I think that, like I say, I think that what's great is when you do travel around and you do go to other places as a blind person in this position, it really does kind of help for people to kind of remember. Because right now, people, I don't think, are sensing it the way that I sense it or believe in it and appreciate it. And I think what that does is it's a throwback. And people remember that what our country's going through right now is a temporary phase and a difficult and dark phase. But ultimately, that phase will be overcome, and we will be restored to the America that we once were with that attitude and that spirit that allows for us to do great things. Other questions? Oh.
Is that it? Any other questions? Yes.
I'm just curious, with your sort of ridiculously grueling schedule, what do you do to relax?
He walks outside for 22 miles.
It's actually, I will tell you, if I could make one recommendation, the work that you guys do is incredibly stressful. The work, you're dealing with families, and you're dealing with kids, and you're dealing with seniors, and you're dealing with, what you're dealing with, every conversation you have is an emotional conversation. Every conversation you have is a passionate conversation. Every conversation you have is unbelievably intense. My recommendation is what I have found in my position. And the one thing, and I will say this, and I don't want to go on too much longer, but the one thing that I'm really focused on as being a judge is, I've been on the bench now for 2 years, is I'm really focused on the fact that I want judges to be kinder to people. And let me explain what I mean by that. What I mean by that is, I'm not saying that judges should change how they do their courtroom activities. I'm not saying that a judge should change how they sentence. I'm not saying a judge should change how they do interpretations. I'm not saying a judge should change anything about how they do their job except for their temperament. And this is something that I'm working on intensely in Michigan, because on the Supreme Court, we have 2 main responsibilities. Number one, we have to be kind of the ultimate decision maker for all cases that involve people in the state of Michigan. That's number one. But the second thing that we do is we have a very intensive administrative role. We have to oversee the 800 judges that work for the judicial branch of the state of Michigan. So there's 800 people, 800 judges that report to us, and it's our job to kind of oversee how the court system functions. So we're able to set benchmarks and parameters that I think are helpful for how the lower courts function, especially when we ultimately choose chief judges, because it's our job to appoint for the 83 counties the chief judges. And it's interesting, too, that one of the decisions that I wrote that I felt blessed to have a chance to write because of my life experiences as a blind person, I think it really allowed for me to write this decision in a way that allowed for me to connect with really the issues that were happening at the lower courts. And this decision was the Stevens decision. It was the people of the state of Michigan versus Stevens. And what happened in this situation was that you had a person that it was a very, very difficult, very intense case. You had a situation where a person was convicted of killing a baby, which is a very, very, as you can imagine, emotionally challenging and incredibly difficult thing to navigate through. I mean, you're talking about something incredibly gruesome. You're talking about the death of a child. You're talking about just probably one of the worst possible things that could ever happen. But those are the kind of cases where you really need to reflect, and you really need to kind of look at what this is going to do for the overall system, what the impact is going to have on our overall courts. And what happened in the Stevens decision was you had a situation where there was a question as to when does a judge cross over the line and go from being impartial to partial? At what point does a judge, in terms of how they conduct the trial, go from being a neutral arbiter to someone who really has become somewhat partial and has become noticed by the jury? And so what this decision did was it set forth guidelines for all judges in Michigan as to what is appropriate and what is inappropriate. And what this decision really focused on was the idea of judicial temperament. How judges conduct themselves, their tone of voice, the way that they, and if you read the decision, this took like forever to write, because one of the key things that I really focused on in this decision was the tone of voice the judge used. And you're probably saying to yourself, how can you diagnose or tell the tone of voice that a judge is using, and how can that be determinative of the impact it's having on the jury? Well, you can read a lot from a transcript, and I can tell from a transcript the tone the judge is taking in terms of the questions that are being asked. And so the reason I kind of answering your question kind of in a long roundabout way was that it's a stressful job. But at the end of the day, when you write a position like this, or you're making a decision like this, and you realize that you have the chance to really focus on an issue like judicial temperament, and that this decision, and thankfully my colleagues all signed on to it, so it was 7-0, but it really set forth an entire benchmark for all the lower courts for what they can do and what they can't do. And this is the thing I would say in answering your question. And I know it's a roundabout way, but this is why I answered it that way. Just to kind of show you kind of the stress that we're all in, and how we have sleepless nights, and how we have lots of anxiety and lots of fear, and there's tons of stress, and that intensity kind of builds because you're always thinking about your cases and your clients and the issues that you're facing and what you have to face the next day, and what's going to happen to you in court, and what's going to happen to the family, and what's going to happen to the client, and all that kind of stuff, and you're just thinking about the consequences. This is what I do, and I find it really does help. When you have to be in your office, be in your office. When you have to take notes or use your computer, do all that from your office. But what I would do is I would separate, because I know your calls are kind of similar to my calls in certain ways when I was practicing. A lot of your calls are talking to family, a lot of your calls are talking to clients, a lot of your calls, they're just, there's a lot of like intense hand-holding and conversation that takes place. When you're doing those calls, I would save those calls for kind of the end of the day. And if you're able to do it, take your cell phone, charge your battery, and do those calls while you're walking. And what you're going to find is, like when I'm having to read about murder and rape and incest and all this horrible stuff, when I'm walking and I'm outside, I find that I'm at a greater sense of peace. I find that it's a little bit more kind of tranquil. And it's funny because my nieces are adorable, and they were asking me, you know, the state gives us 2 offices. We have a Lansing office, and then we have a Detroit office. So we have these beautiful offices that the state gives us. And it's so funny because my nieces say, well, you know, what do you do? And I said, well, I spend my day thinking. And of course, their response was, well, why do you need 2 offices so that way you can think? Can't you think anywhere? And I thought to myself, you know what? They're absolutely right. You can think anywhere, because when you're sitting in a, a hollow office, with all that, that can sometimes add the stress. And so you spend your time in the office when you have to be, but there are certain parts of your day that are more conversational, that are more discussion-based, that you're not taking notes. And in my situation, I walk and listen. And as I'm listening and memorizing, internalizing these cases, I find that if I'm outside, as a blind person, I take the same path I've taken for like 20 years, so I know it perfectly. I find that I'm more relaxed. And I find that when you're exercising, you tend to make better decisions, you tend to be more thoughtful, but most importantly, and I know this is what happens, when I was a lawyer, this is what happened too, you're a little bit more patient. So that way, if you're exercising and one of your clients is just driving you crazy, or their family members are just driving you crazy, because you're getting rid of that stress and that anxiety and you're exercising, you're gonna be able to kind of not be as reactive, and you're going to be a little bit more at peace, and it's a little bit more tranquil, and it's going to increase your patience and your tolerance, and I think it's the most helpful way to do it. So for me, I exercise intensely, and I find that when I exercise and work, it makes me better. And I'm just going to end our time with just one very quick little anecdote. A pessimist and an optimist came together one day on the street. And the pessimist said, "Why is the world such a harsh and challenging and difficult place?" And the optimist responded by saying, "I've always believed that the world is what we make it. You have chosen the most difficult practice area, the hardest and the most stressful. But what's beautiful about what you do, and why I came here to thank you, is because you have chosen through your work, your effort, and your sacrifice exactly what kind of a world you want this to be. Thank you, and may God bless each and every one of you."